Hello, I'm glad you can join us for January's garden calendar. This month we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to cover plants you can prune. We're going to look at some things as far as planning for your garden for this coming spring. We're going to visit the county landfill and the solid waste department, look at some things that are being recycled and you can use as a soil amendments for your garden or landscape beds. And then we're going to visit with Suzanne Reinhardt, and she's going to explain on how we can conduct vermicomposting in our homes. So stay with us, and I hope you enjoy this January garden calendar. Well, here in the month of January, there are a few things us gardeners can get out there and do. Of course, on the lawn, there's not much you can do right there other than if there's some leaves that are blown covering the lawn, please keep them raked back and removed. Pruning now. This is the month we start trees and shrubs of our deciduous types of plants are dormant. You can get out there and start pruning deciduous trees where needed, not any unnecessary pruning, but if there's limbs that are dying or limbs that are rubbing, you can get out there and prune without any trouble, or if they're crowding a house or they just need to be removed for some obvious reason. Grapevines, usually wait till February to prune grapevines, but you can if you are not going to be able to get around to it in February. Fruit trees, apples, peach trees, you can prune those this month. It's a great month for pruning those. As far as fertilizing, nothing really you want to fertilize this month unless it's a little bit for your house plants. Things in bloom, not much in bloom other than maybe possibly some camellias starting to come in bloom. There's still some colorful berries out there that add some color in the winter. Some things you may do, just for a few tips. Bird feeders. If you started feeding birds, please continue to feed your birds because they are having a hard time finding food in the months of January and February. And they are God's creations to watch, feed in the month of January. As far as some other tips, January is a great month for planning. Plan what you're going to plant in the garden. Draw down a piece of paper as far as seeds, transplants. You may go ahead and start ordering some things. If you're thinking about planting some shrubs or trees, kind of measure out that area. Look at the sunlight in that area. Look at the soil type. Take soil tests. Do a lot of planning in the month of January to get ready for when spring does come and you can get out there in the garden and in the yard. In January, the Extension Center at our office, we start taking plant sale orders. We always have strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, fruit trees, and several other things. So check with us. We'll be getting that up and online. You can call our office and order plants that usually are shipped in about mid-March. And those are all varieties that do well in our area. So there's a few tips. And get out there. Just get your tools ready in the workshop and get things ready to go when warm weather does come around. So good luck in the month of January. January is usually a kind of a slow month for the gardeners, but we're going to focus a little bit on recycling and composting and a few of those things. And we have with us today a special guest star, Josh Mitchell, the trash talker is what I call him, director of our solid waste department. And first of all, behind us, Josh has got a big pile of leaves. And I'm going to let Josh tell you what that's all about and what those are used for.
Well, behind us here is our compost pile at the Alexander County landfill. This is something we offer to citizens. You can drop off your yard waste, which would be leaves or grass clippings. The type of composting we do here is called a static pile. And basically, we just make a big pile out of your leaves and grass. We monitor the temperatures with this long rod thermometer here. And after the pile hits around 160 degrees, for a week or so, then we take the loader, as you see over here, and we basically just flip it around. And we go through that process until the end product is what we're desiring, which it'd be a lot blacker, kind of a blackish gray, all of it really like a dirt material once we get done with it. And Then once we get it where we want it, we offer it back to the citizens. You can come and get it and put it on your garden, flower beds, whatever. And it's a great soil additive that we offer for free.
This would be a great product to mix into gardens if you just use traditional row gardens or flower beds, raised bed gardens, whatever. Once it gets that black, rich state, it'd be great to add to any garden site.
I will say, we don't have it all the time ready for folks to pick it up. So call the landfill at 632-9467 before you come all the way down here to see if we have some available. And the ladies in the scale house will help you out and let you know. But we'll load it for you. You don't have to load it. We'll take the machine behind us and throw it on your pickup truck or whatever. But come on down and get some.
And for those that have leaves at the end of the fall and they've loaded it up and want to bring it to the landfill, is there a charge for them to dispose of it here?
Good question. I meant to tell you about that. But no, we take the leaves and grass for free, no charge at all, and then we offer it back to you as free compost.
Another recycled product of the landfill, and that's the mulch, which is the byproduct of the limbs and leaves and brush and things that are brought in here. So tell us a little bit about this activity here, Josh.
We have another site down here. I think Chad is going to show you a picture of the brush pile down here. This is where the citizens can bring their brush and drop it off for $25 a ton. About once a year, we have a contractor that comes in with a tub grinder and grinds all the brush up into the mulch you see behind us. And then once we have this finished product, we give it back to the citizens for free. And as you see there, this organic material, just the same as the compost, as it breaks down, it goes through a heating process. And we have to monitor the temperatures of the mulch as well as the compost because it can catch fire. But we offer this to the citizens for free. Just like the compost, you need to call the landfill and make sure there's some available before you come after it. We do ask that you don't come on Saturday because we're short-handed on Saturdays, and there's only one man down here working on the loader. So.
Well, it actually looks like pretty good product for mulch from a landfill. I've actually visited another landfill and got some mulch, and it was not near as good a product as this. So and this is free. So I'd take advantage of it. It'd be great mulch to put on your landscape beds, wherever you may need it. But great product and free here at the Alexander County Landfill. Anything else, Josh?
One thing I meant to mention is that this yard waste material, it's actually against the law to throw in a landfill to dispose of it. So we actually have to compost it or make mulch out of it. So it's actually illegal, along with a lot of other things, to throw in the garbage. So this is one of the options and another way to dispose of it, or to keep the cycle going, I guess would be the best way to say it.
Well, great job, and we appreciate all you do, and thanks for being a guest with us for our January garden calendar.
Thanks for having me.
Well, here we are with another segment of our January garden calendar, and we're covering composting, recycling, that type of thing. And here we have with me today is Suzanne Reinhardt, our 4-H agent, and she's going to talk to you about another form of recycling. So, Suzanne?
Thank you, Lanny. Today we're going to talk about vermicomposting, which is a form of composting very similar to composting out in your backyard, but we're using a secret weapon. We're using worms, red wigglers, in fact, and it's something that you can actually compost in your home. It's a great activity for children to do. We can do it in classrooms, lots of different places, and it's very simple to do. So I'm going to show you step by step how you can get your own vermicomposter started. So why should you use vermicomposting? Well, it's an easy way to get rid of all your vegetable scraps that you may have around the home instead of throwing them in the trash. It'll lower your disposal trash cost, and it saves water, especially if you've been putting all those food scraps down the drain and using your trash compactor. So using vermicompost bins is another way to save money by recycling. So, and also it provides a great rich nutrient source that you can put for your plants, and for it loosens up the soil. So first of all, you've got to choose a vermicompost bin. Of course, it has to be a dark bins because worms do not like light. These are 3 different types of bins that I've used in the past. This is the first one that we ever used. Margot Mosley and I, about 14 years ago, we did this as an Earth Day project. Very small little bin, but we wanted to try it out first because we had never composted with worms before. So it just any type of bin, and then you need to get a drill and put about 6 to 9 half-inch holes in the bottom. And you're saying, oh my goodness, the worms are going to come out the end, out the bottom, but they will not. Worms do not like light, so they're not going to come through the bottom unless it's too wet inside. And I'll show you on this one. We've drilled the holes here, and there's 9. The bigger the container, really 6 drilled holes at the bottom of this one. We've gone with 9. And this is a container we have used in classrooms before. And this is a little bit bigger. And we put 9 in this one, but what we found out, because the lid is very hard to get off, we ended up having to drill holes up at the top. And the reason we did that, after about 2 or 3 weeks, we noticed a lot of condensation and a lot of water dripping into the worm bin. And we found a couple of worms underneath the worm bin because it was way too wet. So you just have to do a trial and error by the type of bin that you choose. So any size, this bin will, I had one of these at home. We have a family of 4, and it did really well. Some people have really big bins. It depends on how much food scraps that you think that you might have to feed your worms. And the next step, we'll go in how to create and start your worm bin. Now let's start our worm bin. It's sort of like making a casserole or a lasagna. A worm bin is done in layers, sort of like we're recreating the forest floor for the worms to stay in. What you're going to need are some leaves, eggshells that have been crushed up, a cup of soil, and to start off only, I use about 1/4 of a cup of oatmeal, some tea bags, used tea bags, some coffee grounds, and some vegetable scraps to start off, and about 1/2 pound of red wigglers for this size of container. If you go with a larger container, you would probably want about 1 pound of red wigglers. So let's get started. We've already drilled the holes, as you remember. So we're going to take the leaves, and we're going to do a small layer to cover the holes, probably about 1.5 inches deep. The next, I'm going to add the eggshells, and you're probably saying, why? Worms do not have teeth, so what are they eating the eggshells for? We only do that right at the first. The worms actually go up and they're not eating, but they'll just suck in a little piece of the eggshells, and it gives them calcium, a little bit of calcium, but it also gives them grit in their gizzard where they'll grind up the food. So that's the main thing of having the eggshells in there. So I've just sprinkled the eggshells over the top of the layer of leaves. Next, we add about a cup full of soil. The very first time I did this, I thought, worms live in soil, they're going to need a lot more soil. Well, I added more and more and more soil. Well, my vermicompost bin doesn't work. So when it says only add about a cup of soil, that's all it needs. So I'm going to layer and sprinkle about a cup of soil over the top of the leaves and the eggshells. Then to start off with, some people that are really into vermicomposting take just regular quick oatmeal and not flavored or anything, and just sprinkle it over the top. This sometimes helps the worms, whenever you first add the worms, it helps them get started on eating quicker. So I usually sprinkle, this is the only time that I add the eggshells, and the oatmeal is right at the first. Worms are sort of like goats, they eat about anything. They love the tea bags. I usually, if they are tea bags that have the little staple in it. I usually take the staple out. And you just put the tea bags in there. You don't, and the filters, they'll eat paper too. So they'll eat this. They love coffee grounds. So I'm gonna put some coffee grounds in there. And the filter. Then we come to the point, so we've got all of this all in there together. Then comes the food. Now, worms are vegetarians, so they do not eat meat. So no meat in here. Only think about, if they're vegetarians, what a vegetarian would eat. So leftover vegetable scraps, fruit scraps. I try to stay away from citrus because it's too acidic. Some people do put it in there, but the worms that I've had before, they tend not to eat the lemons or the oranges or whatever. Potato peels, cucumber peelings. Now, you don't have to stick them in a food processor and just pulverize it, because worms can eat it. But remember, you can't stick a whole apple in there. Worms don't have teeth, so it's got to be chopped up. If you have like leftover salad, make sure that there's no dressing. Worms cannot eat fat, so no butter, cheese, no dairy products. No animal waste cannot go into a vermicompost bin. But just about this much, about every week, will suffice a container with about a ½ pound of worms. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put the, if you want to label the top of your worm bin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm going to put the worms in the first quadrant. Then the next time I'll feed them, I'll put a food in the second and third. This causes the worms to move from area to area so that it's eating all the material. And just do it this way so it's going through the whole worm bin. So I'm going to put the food scraps, we're going to put them in this corner over here. I just put them right in there. Remember, no salad dressing or anything like that. No bones, no meat. Some people will put rice and bread in there, but I tend not to do that. I compost other ways out in the yard, so I mainly do my vegetable scraps. So all we have right now, we have our food scraps in this one corner over here. Now, the bedding part, which is the most important part. Now you're saying, won't I be having fruit flies? Well, that's the reason we have the shredded up paper. You're actually putting a blanket of about this deep, about 3 or 4 inches on top of your compost pile. And that's to keep the food covered. Otherwise, you'll end up having fruit flies. So what I've done, I've gotten shredded paper from one of our accounting departments, and you can also use shredded up cardboard or shredded up newspaper. And you soak the shredded up paper for about an hour, and it will come to the consistency where water will start to drip out like that. So you need to squeeze out the water, because worms, again, do not like light, and they especially don't like water. So if you see worms coming out the bottom of your bin, you know that it's too wet. And we'll talk about how to solve that problem. So you'll squeeze it until there's very little water coming out. And here's some that I've already squeezed out, and we're just going to put this on top. I'm trying to pull it apart to make a blanket. And this is the one part that you might have to replace if it starts getting down. The worms love this paper, and they will start eating it a lot. You may have to add another layer. Remember, when you feed them again, in about, well, you can feed them like, some people feed them like a ½ pound of food every other day. But I usually fed them like once a week, and they did fine. So we're getting a big thick layer here, spreading all this apart. This is the messiest part of it all. Spreading it out. And the blanket, remember, when I feed again, I will pull back this layer of this blanket of shredded up paper and put the food underneath it and make sure that it is covered about 2 to 3 inches with shredded paper. Otherwise, you'll end up finding fruit flies in there. All right. Now, once I get all this on top, I've got a pretty good layer. And the next, we will add our worms. And here are the workers, the red wigglers. And why do we use red wigglers? Well, scientists say that red wigglers have more of the acid or the juices in their digestive system that will break down the food and digest it. So a lot of people will say, well, I'm going to use night crawlers because they're bigger. Well, you can put night crawlers in there, but they won't work as hard on digesting the food. So all we're going to do, this is about 1/2 pound of red wigglers or red worms, and I'm going to, the very first time, I'm just going to put the red wigglers and the packing material right on top of the worm bin. And the reason we do it on the top is, and I'm going to leave the lid off for about 15 to 20 minutes or until all the worms have traveled down through the paper to get down to the food. So all we do is just sprinkle the worms on top. And there you have the red wigglers getting ready. Of course, they don't like the light right now, and they're in a few minutes, probably 5 to 10 minutes, we won't see any worms. We'll only see the packing material that the worms were in. Then once I see that all the worms have gone down, I'll put the lid back and put it in an area that is about 55 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And next I'll cover how to maintain your worm bin. Well, we've got our worm bin. Our worms have been put on top and they're ready to go, and hopefully they're busy working. Remember, we need to find a cool, dry place. Can be underneath your kitchen cabinets. I put mine underneath my kitchen sink. They don't talk, they're not loud, they don't say a word. In fact, a lot of people don't even know that there are worms at work in my container. Also, a cool, like down in your basement, but 55 to 75 degrees. I will tell you a time that I accidentally left my worm bin outside. It was a cool night, it dropped below freezing, and my worms froze. But brought it inside, and they thawed in about 2 hours, and the worms came back to life. So it's wonderful. So it's really hard not to take care of worms. They're great pets. But let's talk about how to take care of them. Again, you need to, since we added food in this section of the worm bin, the next time I feed, which is probably once a week, I'm going to put the food in this section so that the worms will migrate from this side to this side. Then remember to pull back that shredded paper and then put the food and completely cover it back up. You may have to add some more shredded paper again. And this is also a time to look to see, does your lid have lots of moisture here? If it is dripping and you can shake it out, it's probably too wet for the worms. Also a true sign would be, do you see any worms coming from underneath your worm bin because they can't stand a lot of water? I would suggest that if your container has a flat bottom surface, to maybe get 2 blocks and put underneath it so the air can get into it. We do want air to flow in, and it helps with the decomposition process. So if your shredded up paper seems to be totally dry, then take a water, and you can take a little spray bottle and mist it till it feels damp again, because you want it moist, because the worm's body needs that moisture to stay to be able to work. So again, and of course I did say if you've got a lot of moisture, condensation, you can move the lid like this for a couple of hours, let it dry out a little bit, then maybe drill a hole above the layer of the shredded paper is about right here. And just start maybe by drilling 1/2 inch hole there. And then check it in about 3 or 4 days and to see if that has controlled the moisture. Like I said, every container I've used, it's been different. And you might have to add another hole to get that water level just right and the moisture. Some problems. If you do lift it up and you see fruit flies, that means that you have not covered up the food properly. It's got to be about 3 to 4 inches of shredded up paper on top of the paper. If you see that and the moisture, you can spritz it and get some extra moisture there. In about 3 to 4 months, you will see that your worms, you're probably ready to harvest your worm bin. And what you'll do is you'll take the lid off and you'll actually take your hands and pull, you can put gloves on, and pull all the harvested stuff to one side and then create your worm bin from the start. Your leaves, your soil, your crushed eggshells, all the way to the start, because we want the worms that I've moved all the way over here to start migrating over to the side. Let it go for about 2 weeks and then take out this side, and I will actually go through and make sure I've gotten all my worms and put the worms back in there. What you can do is put them on a old shower curtain or a trash bag, put a light on the top of it. Of course, the worms aren't going to like the light. They're going to move all the way down the bottom, and I start harvesting the vermicompost or the worm castings. We're not going to call it worm poop, but that's what it is. But it's worm compost. This is some, I get about a 1/2 gallon of vermicompost or worm castings about every 3 to 4 months there is no smell. Of course, if you say worm castings, people are going to think that it's going to smell, but there's no smell to it. And then what am I going to do with this? I can take the worm castings, I can mix it up with my regular soil. It's a soil amendment. It also loosens up the soil structure, helps the plant roots go through. I use it in my vegetable garden. You can also take 2 tablespoons of the worm castings, put it in a quart of water and shake it up, and you can actually water your plants. And I do that in the wintertime too. So worm castings, it's like liquid gold. So after the worms have migrated to the other end, you take this out, you harvested your vermicompost, and then you'll start your bin on this side again too. So then you'll have one going. You're about every 3 to 4 months you can harvest your worm bin. I usually, if I go with a bigger one, I usually go about every half a year, about every 6 months. And then I try to make sure that I save the cocoons. Worms lay about, lay these little cocoons. They look like a lemon. They're yellowish green. And in each cocoon, they lay about 1 a week. They have about 3 worms. And and each cocoon, it takes about 75 days for it to mature. Then the worms hatch out, and then it takes about 1.5 months before they start be able to eat. So once you start, if you take care of your worm bin, your worms you shouldn't have to buy any more worms. So I always go through there and I take gloves and I try to find all the little tiny cocoons, because those will hatch out into worms that will help in that process. And again, 50 to about 75 to 80 degrees is really good for your worm bin. I have a pamphlet at our office on it's just a fact sheet front and back on everything that I've covered today. If you're interested in getting a vermicomposting fact sheet, it's a great activity to do with your family and friends and also help the environment.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our January garden calendar. I've learned something. I hope you have. If you do have questions on something we've covered this month, the Cooperative Extension Office is located behind First Baptist Church and beside the Health Department. Also, our phone number, if you need to reach us, is 828-632-4451, or you can find us on the web at alexanderextension.com. Thank you.